Good morning. A couple of great readings. Our theme today is look for the good. And before we get into the talk, I want to acknowledge some good because how many people were here either yesterday or Friday for the parking lot sale? Okay. The sanctuary didn't look the way that it did right now. And I want to thank all the people. I want to acknowledge the people who created the parking lot sale, those who brought things in, those who set it up, those who brought things in, those who came by and bought stuff, and then the wonderful people who in like 40 minutes completely revised and reset the sanctuary. This was a whole bazaar set up in here, and I don't mean bizarre, I mean bazaar, marketplace set up in here with all sorts of tables and stuff like that. And so I want to thank those people. We made somewhere over $4,000 on the sale yesterday. We have still some counting to do, but it's above $4,000. So that's a great figure and a good fundraiser for the church to help us out. So thanks to all those people, and a big hand for them. So I love how the universe works. I'm working my talk and I'm looking for a nice opening quote. And yesterday I was on Facebook and there was a couple people that had birthdays that I always like to wish them a happy birthday. And there was one person there who was like, who is that person? I don't know who how many of you are on Facebook and have Facebook friends? You sit there and go, who's that person again? How did I get them as a friend again? Yeah. So this is one of those people. And so I happened to look on her Facebook page just to see who she was. Somebody I think I met once and lives down in San Diego. And but in the background of her picture there, she had this fabulous little sign. And what it said was, passionately look for the good in people. And if you don't find it, look for the good that is possible in the person and be the support for its realization. Isn't that great? Passionately, not just haphazardly, passionately look for the good in people. And if you don't find it, look for the good that is possible in that person and support them in their realization of it. We have times where we have not been in our highest and best space, right? In our actions and our way of being. And don't we love it when we find somebody who still sees the good in us anyways, and loves us anyways, and supports us in coming back to that place where we know we are, right? Anybody besides me have that experience? Yeah, okay, good. Just checking if you're awake yet today. So why should we look for the good? Why bother at all? I mean, sometimes it's a lot of work. Have you noticed? There's some things it's a lot of work to look for the good in. Why would we do that? Well, first of all, as good religious scientists, we know that we teach the law of attention. What you put your attention on increases. And so if we're looking for good, if that is what we're putting our attention on, guess what increases in our life? Good. More good. We see more good. It's like if you suddenly decide that you want to buy a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, you start to notice yellow Volkswagen Beetles everywhere on the road, right? You've never seen them before, but suddenly you pay attention to them. So we want to pay attention to that good. We want to do it in a way selfishly because it comes back to us. It returns to us. As we're looking for good, as we're looking at the good, as we're committed to seeing good in our lives and good everywhere we can see it, that's what we see more of and more of and more of. Emma Curtis Hopkins reminds us that everything is God. Everything is God. And we are constantly either blessing or cursing God, depending on our outlook on the world. Whatever we call bad is still God. And so do we want to bless our source or do we want to curse our source? Bless. Yeah. Give Luke a good gold star. He got that answer right. Yes, we want to bless it. Okay? Whatever we put out comes back to us. So we want to start focusing on the good. We want to start looking for the good. We want to start being committed to seeing the good. So what about that other stuff? What about the stuff that's hard to see the good in? How do we start to deal with that? The stuff that we can pretty much all agree is not so good. We see abuse, we see genocide, we see racism, we see all this stuff that goes on. How do we start to deal with that? We can't do this, what I like to call the spiritual bypass of, oh, it's all good. You ever meet anybody like, oh, it's all good? I had a friend of mine who was a minister who was going through a real rough time in her life a number of years ago. And several people were just going, well, it's all good, it's all good, you know. And I remember she was talking with me and another practitioner, you know, one time, and she said, the next person who says it's all good to me, I'm going to punch him in the face and ask him if that's good. And I thought it was very Zen, because, you know, in Zen, when you're on the path of Zen, if you move, you know, as you're moving towards the path of enlightenment, you usually come to the place where you sit there and go, it's all illusion. It's all illusion. And that's about the time that the Zen master then takes his stick and whacks you over the head with it, or he grabs your nose or your ear and twists or throws you into a mud puddle. Sort of like, you know, yeah, call this illusion, wake up. You know, and so it's that part where we start to wake up to that. And so, you know, it was a very Zen moment, but it's a spiritual bypass. To call it all good in that way, in that sort of la-ti-da way, is just spiritual bypass. It's not paying attention to what we're really feeling. So it's important that we step back for a moment. When we encounter something that we have a challenge seeing the good in. And we have those things in our lives, right? Yes. We have those things in our life that are challenging to see the good in. Sometimes we have people in our lives that are challenging to see the good in. Okay? We take a step back. The first thing to do, because so often we jump to conclusions right away. We judge this, we judge that. And most of our judgments, we tend to judge good and bad from our own perspective. We have our own set of parameters of what's good and what's bad, and we judge from that perspective. And it's usually either based on our belief systems, or it's based on what's convenient for me. You know? Let's take rain, for instance. Is rain good or bad? You know, here we are in drought-laden California with fires burning off there. We sit there and say rain would be really, really good right now, right? Yes? Thank you. Back east, no. I have a friend of mine who's in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. She's the minister up there, and their church had planned their picnic last Sunday. It got snowed out. September 8th, snowed out. Okay? You know, I come originally from Portland and Seattle, you know, it's like, you know, and in the middle of January or so, rain's not such a good thing. You know, it's been doing it for a really long time. You know, in a flooded area, is rain a good or bad thing? Okay? So we judge good, bad based on the conditions, based on the circumstances, based on the relativity to what we think and what we judge. But if we step back, can we all agree that life is good? A good thing to be. That is, it's good to be alive, okay? All of you are alive, some of you more so than others right now, but but we can all agree that life is a good thing. And rain is necessary. That circulation of water on the planet is necessary to sustain life on this planet, yes? And so we can all say that rain is good. But sometimes, you know, if I'm in the middle of, you know, it may be the drought and it may be good to have rain here, but if that's the day of my outdoor wedding that I had planned, or it's the day of my picnic or my special event, could you not do rain today? You know, I don't want that today. It would be bad to rain on my particular special day. You can rain on other people's special day tomorrow, that's okay. But my day, my special event, yeah, that's bad. Right? Got it? So we have this based on what works for me in most of our good and bad. We have belief systems as what's right or wrong. And we tend to apply the belief systems and we never question the belief system itself. We just look and say, I believe that's wrong, so therefore it's wrong. We don't step back and say, wait a minute, am I applying a healthy belief system to that? Could my judgment expand? Could my idea of what's good expand? And so the first step is to take a step back and say, let me look at that from a different viewpoint. First of all, I'm going to look at it from the viewpoint of remembering that everything is God. God is all there is. And you know, we get to remember that, and we get reminded of that constantly, all the time during the day. God is all there is, God is all there is, God is all there is. And we get to decide, do I really believe that and want to practice it here and now? Or do I want to take this moment and say, well, yeah, but God's kind of messing up over here. I got to, you know, straighten things out or judge it at least, you know. God doesn't quite know what it's doing. Do we remember that God is all there is? And so when I encounter something in my life that I sit there and go, you know, yeah, that feels yucky, and there are things that feel yucky, I have to take a step back and say, okay, yes, and at the same time, I'm going to go for God is all there is. And therefore, because I know that God is good and only good, a capital G good, not my idea of good, but the infinite idea that is constant good. Because I know that's all that's operating here, I choose to step back and be aware of the fact that there is good operating in the world. It's like looking at one of those optical illusions, where if you look at it one way, it's one thing, and if you look at it another way, it's a different thing. Or one of those dot things where, if you're looking at it, it just looks like dots, but if you kind of shift your focus along, you see the image in it. There's a flower, there's a fish, or there's a person, or something like that. You're familiar with those? Yeah. What happens when we get locked into the good and the bad, and the right and the wrong, is all we see is dots, and then we judge whether we like the dots. I don't like that color of dots. I don't like those shape of dots. And all of a sudden, if we were willing to, we step back and we soften our vision. Usually it takes softening our vision, it takes that shift and that softness to be able to allow ourselves to shift and to see the alternate of what's going on. And that's a clue for how we deal with seeing the good in our lives. Because if we're all involved in the dots and working at that level of the dots, they're real, they're there, but there's more. And so when the invitation is to see the good, it's not saying that things that are wrong, things that are bad aren't there. They are. We get diagnoses. We see things, there's stuff happening in the world that's, not healthy for the world. Not healthy for the people doing it, not healthy for us. We acknowledge that that's going on, but we look deeper and we see something more going on in that, and we're willing to. There's sometimes you just have to take it, on the word. I've seen a couple of those little dot things that I just can't get it. And I usually am pretty good at getting this, but once in a while I get one that I just can't get it. I just can't, my eyes just don't shift into that mode. And I have to take the person's word for it that yes, there is another image in there. And sometimes that's how we are with the good. I don't get it. I can look at the situation, I know that God's there, but I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to trust the fact that there is an infinite presence there, and it knows what it's doing. And I don't have to. I'm just going to trust it. I'm going to know that there is good in there somewhere, and I'm going to keep looking at it until I see it, or until I realize it's just not mine to see and be involved in, and let it go. Does that resonate? So we start to step back and we start to shift. So where does evil come from? We like to talk about good and evil, evil being the opposite. We have the idea, there's this wonderful story that is in our collective consciousness from the Bible, the first chapter or first book of the Bible, on Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve are living in this Edenic state, pure unity of consciousness, everything is good. And they get tempted to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is the perception of divisive consciousness, that there is this and there is that. There is the judgment and the perception. Now in the Bible, this is taught to be, or said to be, kind of conveyed a little bit to be a bad thing. They get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, as in that's a punishment. The truth is that we all go through this. We are born in an Edenic state. Before we are born, we are in an Edenic state. We are in a unitive state. We're pure spirit. All there is God. And then we decide to play on this planet. Well, guess what? We can't play in this planet very long and be in that pure Edenic state. Think of a baby that's crawling out across the freeway. Doesn't perceive that it's not supposed to be there. Does oh, look at those shapes coming at me. It's all good. It's all God. We have to be able to discern. We have to be able to start to say what works, what doesn't work, what's good for me, what's bad for me. I remember there was a kid in my neighborhood when I grew up. One of my friends that when he was very young was sitting on the next to the stove. His mom had just made a pie. I think it was a blackberry pie. And he's sitting there sticking his finger into the hot pie right out of the oven, hot pie, going, ouch, hot, good. Ouch, hot, good. He was sort of that way in his whole life, too. He would keep sticking his hand in the ouch, hot everywhere in his life. That was kind of his way. Most of us learn from those experiences to not stick our hand into the hot pie, to let it cool, to delay our gratification a little bit. Okay? We get discernment. That's called the knowledge of good and evil. That's called getting what works for us and what doesn't work for us. It's just that we label what doesn't work for us as evil. And evil, if you take that word, just the word itself, is living backwards. It's the word live turned around backwards. Flip the word or evil around and you've got the word live. And it gives you a perfect perspective of where does evil come from. It's living out of alignment with spirit. It's living backwards from principle. Whenever we're doing stuff that looks like bad stuff in our life or evil in our life, we're usually living out of alignment with principle, and all we got to do is flip around and live into principle. Okay? So we don't teach that there's some force of evil out there. We don't teach that there's some little guy running around with a pitchfork and a lake of fire at the end of our lives and all that good stuff. We teach that there's infinite God, and infinite good is all that there is. God is all there is. God is infinite, and there can't be something opposed to God, because then what? God's not infinite. Okay? So we teach that God, the infinite presence, the oneness is all that there is. So good, as we talked about, is context dependent. So the context we place in, the frame that we view it with, the lens that we view it with, determines whether we view things as good or bad. And so it's important to check our lens every once in a while. It's important to check the frame that we're holding every once in a while. Is it accurate? Does this frame, does this lens still serve me? There's a lot of us who grew up in homes where there was a certain kind of behavior that was really important and valuable to have at your house. It helped you survive. But when you get out into the world and you're working with other people, that same behavior not only doesn't help you survive, it holds you back. If you learn to be very closed and held back, if you learn to be invisible, if you learn all that stuff and not play safe, that doesn't help in relationships when you get going, when you get out there into life. Because relationships thrive on being open and feeling safe and having that communication, that back and forth. Being successful in our life doesn't happen when we try to be invisible. I had a friend who used to be able to walk into a room and nobody would notice her. Yeah? No matter what she was wearing, no matter how loud she walked into the room, they would not notice her because she was just invisible. That was a consciousness. So it's relative to what we want and what we believe. So let's play with this for a minute. Want to play with a couple examples? Yeah. Back in the early 80s, I had the privilege of being friends with an older gentleman who had grown up in a different country than ours and was sharing some of his experiences growing up. And he said that when he was growing up, when he was young, the way that the country worked, he was from a relatively small to mid-sized village, in that country. And he said that the way the education system worked was the only people who got higher education, okay, were either the sons, and just the sons, not the daughters, the sons of the aristocrats or the sons of the wealthy merchants. Those were the only people who could go on to a higher education. And a new political leader came in who passed some reforms, and they basically opened up the education system to where everybody could have access to it, and you were gauged not based on who your parents were and how rich they were, or how the aristocracy, but your ability to learn and your performance. Would you call that good? Sounds great, right? Yeah. The political leader was named Adolf Hitler, and the guy grew up in a country called Germany, pre-war. And right now, your good, bad meters are kind of going, blah, 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 right? Because we've been taught in this culture that Adolf Hitler is the ultimate symbol of evil. And therefore, everything about him is bad. And this guy, is not unaware. I mean, he's like, very aware of what Hitler did, and very, being German, he was still carrying shame about the whole thing that happened. Okay. And he was still trying to wrestle in his mind, years and years, decades later, with how could the people have, even let this guy into office. But that was one of the things he said. He said he did some really good things when he first came into office for the people. He advanced the country in a lot of really healthy ways. Okay? Was he good? Was he bad? Take a breath. Okay. World War II, pretty clear, not a good thing. Except that Europe has been at war with each other for millennia, or at least centuries before that. I don't think if we study history, there's not a period of anywhere more than about 50 years that some European country wasn't at war with some other European country, and if they weren't at war with each other, they were having civil war, right? And World War II came along and was so devastating and so terrible that people finally said, you know what, we can't do this anymore. We can't do this to ourselves and each other anymore. There was a winner in the war, but nobody really won the war. There were so many buildings that were, there were great historic buildings that were devastated. There was so much turmoil and so much strife in the countries that they finally said enough of that. And today we have, instead of being at war with each other, we have a European Union. The same economy, the same, they've tied in the currency is the same, open borders. They work together to create problems, or to solve problems, excuse me. Sometimes they work together to create problems too, but they also solve the problems together rather than going to war with each other. Anti-Semitism was rampant throughout Europe, prior to that. And again, when we saw the logical outcome of where do we take anti-Semitism and saw where it went, people finally started to say, we can't do that anymore. We can't do that anymore. Was that good or was that bad? Jonas Salk, the inventor of the polio vaccine, has this wonderful thing to say: I judge things from an evolutionary perspective. How does this serve and contribute to the process of our own evolution? That's the question he asks. How does this serve and contribute to the process of our own evolution? That's a different question probably than most of us ask when we see something. He says, I ask that question rather than think of good and evil in moral terms. I see the triumph of good over evil as a manifestation of the error-correcting process of evolution. Isn't that great? And what he says is, it's natural to good is natural. Good is the natural normal state. Good is what we are all evolving into. And we have these processes, and sometimes we have to fall into painful situations to learn not to do that. As I've talked about before, most of us learn to walk, all of us learn to walk by failing at walking. And experiencing sometimes some pain with that process, right? Excuse me, a little tickle in my throat. We have to go through the pain. Rumi has a fabulous quote that says, the cure for pain is in the pain. Good and bad are mixed. If you don't have both, you don't belong with us. If we're not experiencing both, we're not human. But the cure for the pain isn't avoiding the pain, it's going through the pain. It's finding the God, it's finding the good in the pain. It's going through it. And so that's where we start to see the good. We start to say, look, I'm going to find the good in this situation no matter what. It's like the little kid who gets the pony or the pile of manure for a Christmas present and starts digging and says, with all this manure, there's got to be a pony here somewhere. Okay? Most of you are probably familiar with the story of the farmer whose horse gets away. And the villagers all come to the farmer and say, oh, how terrible for you. You own one horse and the horse escaped. You've lost all that value. And a couple nights later, the horse comes back and brings with it 5 more horses with it, 5 wild stallions with it. And the man, by the way, the first time says, well, we'll see. Brings these 5 horses back, and the villagers all say, how fortunate you are. Your fortune has just increased 6 times. And he says, we'll see. And a couple days later, his son is training the horses, and he falls off and breaks his leg, and the villagers all go, oh, how terrible. And he says, we'll see. And a couple weeks later, the army comes through and conscripts all the healthy young men for the Emperor's War, which is a pretty suicidal war. And they skip over the son because he's got a broken leg. And the villagers all say, how fortunate. And the man says, we'll see. See, the villagers are riding this wave of up and down, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, right, wrong, all that stuff. The farmer is sitting in the consciousness of being centered, trusting life, and allowing it to flow. Without judging it, without trying to interrupt it, without trying to circumvent it. And that's the space I'm going to invite you to start to play in this week. To notice what life is. To just notice what life is. And see if you can notice it without the judging. In the Zen version of that story, the farmer says, judging, always judging. We tend to do that. I tend to do that. We look at something, the first thing we do is judge it, instead of saying, how do I see God in this? How do I see God in this? And the way to see it, as we talked about, is to soften the focus. It's to move into the heart. My favorite poem by Rumi, one of my favorite poems by Rumi, is, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about language, ideas, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Isn't that great? So this week what I'm going to invite you to do is spend time in that field. And the way to spend time in the field, one, is to become aware just of your judgments. Just become aware. It's sort of like step aside and watch yourself. I encounter an experience. What am I doing? Am I judging it, or am I looking for the good in it? Just notice. And by the way, don't beat yourself up if you find yourself judging. Don't judge yourself for judging. Just notice that you're judging. Just notice it. We all do it. Secondly, does my way of judging or evaluating the situation support my highest values? Does it support my belief that God is all there is, and God is good, and God is infinite love? Or am I working off of a different value system? So just notice, ask yourself, is it supporting my highest values? If I believe in love, am I evaluating from love? And then thirdly, choose to see God everywhere. Set an intention. Set an intention today for this week. I am going to see God everywhere. Everywhere. Especially in the hardest places to see God. See, it's easy when you're hanging out with a really nice friend or you're in a beautiful space in nature. Can we see it in the dark places? Can we see it when we look at a homeless person? Can we see it when we think about the people who did the burning of our lawn back there? Can we see it when we look at whatever our unfavored political party or figure is? Can we see God wherever it is? Can we see God in our ex? Can we see God in that person that we really don't like? Can we see God everywhere? I'm going to set the intention to see God everywhere this week. And then again, to be gentle with yourself. Be gentle in the process. Just notice if you get off track with that, just bring yourself back. Get off track, bring yourself back. I'm going to see God everywhere I can this week. Are you willing to play with that? Yeah. Great. I'm going to close with a quote from Ernest Holmes. Awakening is a process of evolution, a little here and a little there, until the whole eye is opened, and we see that life is neither separate from God nor different from good. Life is God, and good is the only power there is or can be. That's your mission this week, is to live from that. Let's pray together. And so I begin by turning my attention to that one infinite presence and recognizing that that infinite presence is indeed all there is. There is nothing but that presence. That which we call God, Allah, Buddha mind, Spirit, the universe, infinite presence, that is all that there is. And it is good. If it were not, it would have self-destructed long, long ago. It can't be against itself. And that infinite presence is love, pure love. That love can't be turned off, it is just constantly in flow. And because that is the truth, I know that each person here and everything on this planet, all of it, including the planet itself, is one of God. All of it is God. And so we who are aware, we who are waking up to this, we are saying, yes, I'm willing to remember that I am God. I speak my word for us. That we remember this at a deeper and deeper and more powerful level. That we begin just with our consciousness to shift and to see the good, to see the God in everything. And as we see that good, we become more creative, we become more flexible, we become agents of change in a way that is powerful and truly in alignment with Spirit in our lives. Because instead of trying to shift things from our value system, our perspectives, our belief systems, we are shifting things from our spiritual consciousness. We turn to that first. We love ourselves. We value everything within ourselves. We first stop judging ourselves. Every area within us, every aspect of us that we have held in judgment in the past, we let go of. And then we stop judging others. Every place where we've held people in judgment, we let go. And we are willing to simply say, I'm willing to see God. I'm willing to see good. No matter what the dots look like, I'm willing to see past the dots and into the image of God. I'm willing to passionately see this person, myself included, as the one, as the divine, as good. And I won't stop until I do. And so I give thanks for each person who says yes to this. I give thanks for our willingness to take on this task, which at times will be difficult, at times will be easy, and yet it is so necessary on this planet and is so necessary for our evolution. I'm grateful for each of us who does this, whatever degree we do it in. And so I release the process of how this shows up and of the good that manifests out of all this into a law that knows exactly how to manifest it in each of our lives and manifest on this planet. We simply move into alignment with that law. We say yes to that good. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.
Love you, David.